The old castle library had been sealed for 23 years. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through tall windows as the cleaning crew worked their way through centuries of accumulated belongings. Prince Alexander had avoided this room since his mother's death, unable to face the memories that lingered between these walls where Princess Catherine had spent countless hours reading and writing. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, the head librarian who had served the royal family for over 4 decades, carefully lifted books from the mahogany shelves. Her weathered hands trembled slightly as she recognized each volume. Many bore the princess's personal bookmarks, pages turned down at favorite passages, and margins filled with her elegant handwriting. "Your Highness," Eleanor called softly to Prince Alexander, who stood frozen in the doorway. "Perhaps you should return later. This is quite overwhelming even for me." But Alexander stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. At 45, he had his mother's same piercing blue eyes and her stubborn streak. "No, Eleanor. I've put this off long enough. My children deserve to know about their grandmother through more than just photographs and formal portraits." The prince moved deeper into the library, running his fingers along the desk where his mother used to sit every morning, writing letters to friends and family around the world. The desk drawers had been locked since her passing, the key lost somewhere in the chaos that followed her sudden death from a heart attack at just 52 years old. Eleanor watched as Alexander examined an ornate music box sitting on the corner shelf. Inside, beneath faded silk lining, something crinkled. His heart raced as he carefully lifted out a small brass key, tarnished with age but still intact. Without speaking, both he and Eleanor knew exactly what this key might unlock. The largest desk drawer resisted at first, the lock stiff from years of disuse. When it finally opened with a soft click, they found it filled with personal items. Fountain pens, pressed flowers, photographs, and beneath it all, a leather-bound journal with a small brass lock that perfectly matched the key. Alexander's hands shook as he held the journal. The burgundy leather was soft and worn, its pages yellowed at the edges. His mother's initials, CMR for Catherine Marie Rosewood, were embossed in gold on the cover. Eleanor stepped back, sensing this moment required privacy. "Take your time." "Your Highness?" "I'll continue with the books," she whispered, moving to the far side of the library. Alexander sank into his mother's favorite armchair, the same one where she used to read him bedtime stories when he was young. His fingers traced the journal's cover for several minutes before he found the courage to insert the key and turn it. The lock opened with the faintest whisper. The first page was dated 24 years ago, just months before his mother's death. In her distinctive handwriting, flowing and graceful, were the words that would change everything he thought he knew about the woman who had raised him. "My darling Alexander will read this someday, and I pray he will understand. The life he has known, the mother he has loved, has been built on a foundation of secrets I can no longer bear to carry alone. I am not the woman the world believes me to be. I am not the woman even my son believes me to be." Alexander's breath caught in his throat. His vision blurred as tears he hadn't expected began to fall. The journal trembled in his hands as he continued reading. "I was born Catherine Miller in a small farming village in Yorkshire, not Catherine Rosewood of the noble Rosewood family as the world has been told. My father was a coal miner, my mother a seamstress. We had nothing but love and dreams that seemed impossible to reach." The words hit him like physical blows. Everything he had been told about his mother's aristocratic background, her privileged upbringing, her family estate, all of it was a lie. He looked up at Eleanor, who was pretending to organize books, but was clearly watching him with concern. "Eleanor," he called, his voice hoarse. "Did you know?" The elderly woman's face crumpled. She had been dreading this moment for over 2 decades. Your Highness, Your mother made me promise never to speak of it. She said if her truth ever came out, it should come from her own words, not from someone else's memories." Alexander turned back to the journal, his hands steadier now despite the emotional storm raging inside him. The next entry revealed even more stunning details about his mother's early life, how she had worked as a maid in London, how she had educated herself by reading discarded newspapers and borrowed books, how she had carefully crafted a new identity to escape the poverty that had defined her childhood. As afternoon turned to evening, Prince Alexander remained in that chair, reading page after page of revelations that shattered everything he thought he knew about the woman who had shaped him into the man he became. Each entry revealed another layer of deception, another carefully constructed lie, but also another example of his mother's incredible strength, intelligence, and determination to create a better life not just for herself, but for the family she hoped to one day have. The journal was far from finished, and Alexander sensed that the most shocking revelations were yet to come. 3 days had passed since Prince Alexander discovered his mother's journal, and he had barely left the library. Eleanor brought him meals that often went cold as he became consumed by reading Princess Catherine's true story. Each page revealed new layers of deception, but also a growing understanding of the extraordinary woman his mother had been. The journal entries from 24 years ago continued to unfold the elaborate scheme Catherine had constructed. She wrote about studying wealthy families' histories, learning their mannerisms, and practicing their accents until she could perfectly mimic the aristocratic lifestyle she had never lived. She had spent months researching the Rosewood family, a minor noble line that had died out in the early 1900s, knowing that few people would be able to verify details about such an obscure family. "I became Catherine Rosewood because Catherine Miller could never marry a prince," she had written. "I created documents, forged letters, even hired actors to play distant relatives at social functions. Every detail was planned. Every story rehearsed until it became my reality." Alexander paused at a particularly emotional entry, where his mother described meeting his father, Prince Philip, at a charity gala in London. She wrote about the terror she felt when Philip began showing serious interest in her, knowing that closer scrutiny might expose her lies. But she also wrote about falling genuinely in love with a man who was kind, intelligent, and nothing like the spoiled royal she had expected to meet. "Philip makes me want to be better than the lie I've created," Catherine had written. "He sees goodness in Catherine Rosewood that I'm not sure Catherine Miller ever possessed. Perhaps in loving him, I can become the woman he believes me to be." The entries leading up to their engagement were filled with panic and self-doubt. Catherine described several moments when she almost confessed everything to Philip, but each time she convinced herself that revealing the truth would destroy not just their relationship, but his position within the royal family. The monarchy had strict rules about bloodlines and appropriate marriages, and Catherine knew that a coal miner's daughter would never be accepted as a future princess. Alexander's hands clenched the journal tighter as he read about his parents' wedding day. His mother described standing at the altar in Westminster Abbey, surrounded by thousands of people, and knowing that she was perhaps the biggest fraud in the church's long history. She wrote about wanting to run, about the weight of the crown that would one day sit on her head, and about the fear that someone in the congregation might recognize her from her previous life. "But when Philip took my hands and spoke his vows," she wrote, "I felt something I had never experienced before. Belonging. For the first time in my life, someone loved me not for what I could pretend to be, but for who I was in that moment. Even if that person was built on lies, Philip's love made her real." The journal revealed that Catherine's carefully constructed background began to unravel almost immediately after the wedding. Palace investigators routinely checked the backgrounds of all new royal family members, and several inconsistencies in Catherine's story were quickly discovered. However, the entries suggested that someone within the palace hierarchy, someone with significant power, had helped cover up these inconsistencies. Alexander's heart raced as he read his mother's account of being summoned to meet with Lord William Ashworth, the Queen's private secretary and one of the most influential people in the royal household. Instead of exposing Catherine, Lord Ashworth had made her a proposition that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Lord Ashworth knows everything," Catherine wrote in increasingly shaky handwriting. "Every lie, every forged document, every false story I told. But instead of destroying me, he wants to use me. He says a princess who owes her position to his discretion is exactly what the monarchy needs. Someone who will never forget that her status can be taken away as easily as it was given." The journal detailed how Lord Ashworth had essentially blackmailed Catherine into becoming his spy within the royal family. She was forced to report private conversations, share details about family disagreements, and even influence Prince Philip's opinions on political matters. In exchange, Lord Ashworth ensured that no one would ever investigate Catherine's background too closely. "I am trapped," she wrote. "If I confess to Philip, I lose everything and probably face criminal charges for fraud. If I continue this charade, I become Lord Ashworth's puppet forever. There is no escape from the web I've woven, and now my lies are being used to hurt the very people I've come to love." Alexander's anger grew with each page, not just at his mother's deception, but at the man who had exploited her desperation and fear. Lord Ashworth had passed away years earlier, but Alexander remembered him as a stern, cold man who always seemed to know more than he should about private family matters. The journal entries from around the time of Alexander's birth revealed Catherine's growing desperation. She wrote about holding her newborn son and feeling physically ill at the thought that his entire life would be built on her lies. She described lying awake at night, wondering if she should disappear rather than continue to deceive her family. "My beautiful boy deserves better than a mother who lives in constant fear," she wrote. "Every time someone mentions my family history or asks about my childhood, I want to scream. I've created a prison for myself, and now I've locked my son inside it too." But the entries also revealed Catherine's growing resolve to somehow break free from Lord Ashworth's control. She began keeping detailed records of their meetings, documenting every demand he made and every piece of information he forced her to share. She started gathering evidence that could potentially expose his corruption and abuse of power. "I may not be able to undo the lies I've told," she wrote, "but I can make sure Alexander never has to live under someone else's threats. Lord Ashworth thinks he owns me because he knows my secrets, but he's forgetting that I know his secrets too." As Alexander reached the final entries from this period, he realized his mother had been planning something significant in the months before her death. The last entry he read that evening was both heartbreaking and ominous. "Tomorrow I meet with Lord Ashworth for what I hope will be the last time. I have enough evidence to destroy him, but using it means destroying myself too. Perhaps it's time for Catherine Miller to finally tell the truth about what Catherine Rosewood has done." The final section of Princess Catherine's journal was the most difficult for Prince Alexander to read. The entries, written in the weeks before her death, revealed a woman who had decided to risk everything to protect her family's future. Catherine had spent months gathering evidence of Lord Ashworth's corruption, blackmail schemes, and abuse of power that extended far beyond their arrangement. Eleanor found Alexander the next morning, still in his mother's chair. The journal closed on his lap and tears dried on his cheeks. She approached carefully, carrying a cup of tea and wearing the expression of someone who had wrestled with secrets for too many years. "Your Highness," she said softly, "there's something else you need to know." Alexander looked up, his eyes red from exhaustion and emotion. "More secrets, Eleanor? I'm not sure I can handle any more revelations about my mother." "This isn't about what she hid from you," Eleanor replied, settling into the chair across from him. This is about what she did to protect you. The day before she died, your mother came to me with a sealed envelope. She made me promise to keep it safe and only open it if something happened to her. Eleanor reached into her cardigan and withdrew a yellowed envelope with Alexander's name written in his mother's handwriting. She died so suddenly, and in the chaos afterward, I was afraid to give this to you. Your father was devastated. You were just 22 and trying to hold everything together. I convinced myself it was better to let sleeping secrets lie. Alexander's hands shook as he took the envelope. Inside was a letter dated just 2 days before his mother's fatal heart attack, along with copies of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be transcripts of recorded conversations. My dearest Alexander, the letter began, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and Eleanor has finally found the courage to give you what I could not say in life. The journal tells you who I was and what I did, but these documents tell you why I had to die. The letter explained that Catherine's heart attack had not been natural. Lord Ashworth, faced with her ultimatum and evidence of his crimes, had arranged for her to be poisoned during their final meeting. The toxin used was one that mimicked heart failure, and Catherine had suspected something was wrong almost immediately after drinking the tea he offered her. I felt the poison working before I even left his office, she wrote. I had perhaps an hour before it would stop my heart completely. I used that hour to gather the evidence I'm leaving for you and to record my final conversation with him, where he confessed to everything. Alexander's hands trembled as he examined the audio transcription. His mother had somehow managed to secretly record Lord Ashworth admitting not only to her murder, but to decades of blackmail, corruption, and manipulation within the royal household. The conversation revealed that Catherine was not his only victim. Several other members of the royal family and government officials had been under his control through various schemes. But the most shocking revelation came in the letter's final paragraphs. Catherine had discovered that Lord Ashworth was planning to extend his control to the next generation by finding ways to blackmail Alexander once he came of age. The evidence suggested that Ashworth had been investigating Alexander's university friends, his romantic relationships, and even his private conversations, looking for anything that could be used to manipulate him. I could not let him control your life the way he controlled mine, Catherine wrote. I chose to expose him, knowing it would cost me my life, but hoping it would free you from ever living under his shadow. I pray that someday you will understand that everything I did, every lie I told, was because I loved you and your father more than life itself. The envelope also contained legal documents that Catherine had prepared with a solicitor in secret. If anything happened to her, these papers would automatically trigger an investigation into Lord Ashworth's activities. However, the investigation had been quietly buried after her death, presumably by other corrupt officials who were also under Ashworth's influence or who had their own reasons for keeping his secrets hidden. Alexander sat in stunned silence for several minutes before Eleanor spoke again. Your mother was the bravest person I've ever known, Your Highness. She may have started life as Catherine Miller from Yorkshire, but she died as a true princess, willing to sacrifice herself for her family. That evening, Alexander made a decision that would change everything. He called for a meeting with the current palace leadership, including the Queen's private secretary, who had replaced Lord Ashworth, the head of palace security, and several trusted advisors. In that meeting, he shared everything he had learned from his mother's journal and evidence. The revelations sent shockwaves through the palace. An immediate investigation was launched, not just into Lord Ashworth's past crimes, but into the network of corruption he had built over decades. Several current officials were found to be connected to the scheme, and for the first time in royal history, a comprehensive review of palace security and ethical practices was implemented. Alexander also made the difficult decision to share the truth about his mother's background with his father, Prince Philip, who was now 70 and had never remarried after Catherine's death. The conversation was heartbreaking, but Philip's response surprised everyone. "I always suspected Catherine wasn't who she claimed to be," Philip admitted. "There were little things, the way she held a teacup, her knowledge of literature that didn't match her supposed education, her genuine amazement at things that should have been familiar to someone from her claimed background. But I didn't care about her past. I cared about her heart, her kindness, her intelligence. Learning she was even stronger and more remarkable than I knew only makes me love her memory more." In the months that followed, Alexander worked to honor his mother's true legacy. He established a foundation in the name of Catherine Miller, not Catherine Rosewood, that provided education opportunities for children from working-class families. He also instituted new policies within the royal household to prevent the kind of blackmail and corruption that had destroyed his mother's peace of mind. The journal and its revelations remained a closely guarded family secret, but Alexander found peace in finally knowing the truth about the woman who had raised him. Catherine Miller had been a remarkable person who had overcome incredible obstacles through intelligence, determination, and love. Her lies had been born from desperation, but her courage in the end had protected her family and exposed a cancer within the very heart of the monarchy. Standing in the library where this journey had begun, Alexander carefully placed his mother's journal in a new display case, along with a small plaque that read, "In memory of Catherine Miller, 1943-1995, a true princess in every way that mattered." The secrets were finally free, and Catherine's son could now live without the shadows that had haunted his mother's life.